Good morning all. We're about to begin. I'm going to ask you to take your seats. We are going to start today's proceedings with prayer. I am going to invite Mr. Sheldon Grant, to open in prayer.
Let us pray. Father, Lord, King and the great creator of all things, we come this morning as humbled servants in our own respects. We thank you that in the midst of a pandemic, global economic and social crisis, and an unprecedented changes in climate, we still say thanks for your guidance, love, and support. We here today have been entrusted with the opportunity to lead this project as a step to help shaping Jamaica's response given the realities around us. We continue to say thanks for all the players, partners, funders, executors, and implementers of these activities under this Hills to Ocean project. As we move into today's proceedings of the day, we crave your input, presence, and guidance, resulting in success, reach, and impact as desired. Bless us, bless Jamaica, grant us strength and courage. Amen.
Senator the Honorable Matthew Samuda, Minister without Portfolio, Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation. Mrs. Myriam Ferran, Deputy Director General, Directorate General for International Partnerships in the European Commission. Representatives of member states of the European Union in Jamaica. Mr. Frederick Eckfeldt, Deputy Head of Delegation of the EU in Jamaica. Mr. Anicito Rodriguez-Ruiz, Head of Cooperation of the EU Delegation in Jamaica. Other members of the visiting delegation from the European Commission. Mr. Courtney Cole, Chief Technical Director in the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries, and representatives of RADA, the Rural Agricultural Development Authority, and the Public Gardens Division, as well as other arms of the Ministry of Agriculture. Mr. Ainsworth Carroll, Director for Planning, Projects Monitoring, Evaluation, and Research in the National Environment and Planning Agency, and other NEPA staff. Ms. Rhiann McKenzie of the White River Fish Sanctuary, and other representatives from our non-state actors and community-based civil society organizations, as well as academia, University of the West Indies, Mona. Members of the steering committee, colleagues from the Planning Institute, the press, other distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning again. On behalf of the Planning Institute, I extend to you a warm welcome to the launch of the project, A Jamaican Path from Hills to Ocean. Let me first extend apologies for the absence of Dr. Wayne Henry, Director General of the Planning Institute, who would have loved to be here, but he's on duty travel. This morning's launch, ladies and gentlemen, is a milestone on a journey which began some 4 years ago, when discussions were initiated between the Government of Jamaica and the European Union delegation on a project to address the climate change challenge. As custodians of Vision 2030, Jamaica's long-term development plan, the Planning Institute recognizes the need to urgently respond to the clear and present danger which climate change presents. Jamaica, a small island developing state, is particularly vulnerable to the impacts of climate change, not only as it relates to our natural resources, but also in terms of its impact on our productive sectors, tourism and agriculture in particular, as well as our country's social well-being. Our national development goals are at risk unless Jamaica builds its resilience to the impacts of climate change. For this reason, the government, under the leadership of the Planning Institute, grasped at the opportunity to partner with the European Union on a project under the EU's Global Climate Change Alliance Plus facility. The Hills to Ocean project represents the second initiative to be supported by the Global Climate Change Alliance. The initiative is jointly funded by a generous grant of €4.9 million from the European Union through the GCCA and counterpart resources of $1.1 million from the Government of Jamaica. The aim of the Hills to Ocean project is to promote sustainable livelihoods while strengthening the resilience of the country and communities to climate change. The project uses the integrated sustainable landscape management approach, recognizing the impact of activities in the upper reaches of the watersheds on downstream communities. The project will further our Vision 2030 goals as well as our Sustainable Development Goals. Although the project is being launched today, implementation began over a year ago. Our launch provides an opportunity to recognize a strong collaboration that has been forged among those involved in the project. Implementation has been characterized by a strong partnership among the EU and the government as sponsors, the Planning Institute as the executing agency, and our implementing partners, the Public Gardens Division of the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries, RADA, and NEPA. There is also strong collaboration with other government ministries, departments, and agencies, such as the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation, the Forestry Department, the Met Office, and the Water Resources Authority, as well as with the University of the West Indies, MONA. Our non-state actors and civil society community-based organizations who are a part of the governance arrangements of the project ensure that the needs of the respective community groups, farmers, fisherfolk, tourism interests, etc., are taken into consideration in the design and execution of the respective interventions. We are most appreciative of the technical advice and support, as well as the active participation that our implementing partners and other state and non-state stakeholders have provided since the commencement of implementation. Today's event also provides an opportunity to showcase the very useful and, might I say, groundbreaking work which has been produced under the project thus far. In November 2021, under the project, field work commenced for the rapid ecological assessment of 3 targeted watershed management units: the Wagwater watershed, the Rio Nuevo watershed, and the Rio Bueno White River watershed. Wagwater, St. Mary, Rio Nuevo is in St. Anne, Rio Bueno and White River are in St. Anne and Trelawney. The rapid ecological assessment, which was conducted by the Department of Life Sciences of the UWI MONA, is perhaps one of the largest and most important studies of its kind undertaken in Jamaica in recent times. It provides a comprehensive and in-depth assessment of the socioeconomic aspects of the 3 watersheds, their biological and physical features, as well as an assessment of the possible impact of climate change threats and other stressors on their ecosystems. This will be useful not only in informing actions and activities to be executed under the Hills to Ocean project, but hopefully the information generated by the REA will inform the development of climate change and environmental policy nationally, as well as the design of further intervention in the watersheds. The main findings of the REA will be discussed in the validation workshop, which will follow. Our launch is also very well timed with the visit of a team from the European Commission led by Mrs. Myriam Ferran, Deputy Director General with responsibility for international partnerships. The team is in Jamaica to participate in the 6th Jamaica EU Political Dialogue, and we welcome the delegation, and we use this opportunity to express our profound appreciation for the assistance provided by the EU over the 47 years of partnership. The EU continues to be Jamaica's largest source of grant financing, which supports a cooperation program which is diverse and well aligned with Jamaica's strategic priorities. Minister Samuda, our colleagues from the European Union and the European Commission, all our distinguished guests, thank you so much for agreeing to participate in what we anticipate will be a productive and informative day of discussions. Thanks so much for coming. Okay, we're going to get into our agenda. And without further ado, I wish to invite Ms. Rhian Mackenzie to make remarks on behalf of the community-based organizations which are represented in the project. Ms. Mackenzie is a trained marine and terrestrial biologist, among other things. She joined the White River Fish Sanctuary in 2019 and currently serves as a sanctuary manager with responsibility for oversight of the day-to-day operations of the sanctuary. Please welcome Ms. Mackenzie, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much for that introduction. Good morning, everyone. Honorable Mr. Matthew Samuda, other dignitaries, my fellow panelists, ladies and gentlemen, good morning. Can I take off my mask? Thank you. Thanks. It's truly an honor to be here, to take part in this initiative, in this project. We're very honored to be a part of the panel this morning. So the White River Fish Sanctuary, for those who may not know, is a protected area, a no fishing zone, located in St. Anne, but our sanctuary extends into St. Mary as well. And it is located within the Ocho Rios Marine Park protected area. Basically, what we do is focus on environmental protection, marine, and the White River itself, so freshwater, which allows us to look at the entire watershed area and keep an eye on environmental issues that are happening there while being a community-based organization. We focus on environmental protection because, as I'm sure we all know here, how important it is for Jamaica to have a natural, healthy environment. And we do our part along with the community members of the fishing village and the wider community to make sure that our area is maintained to the best of our ability. As you may know, the overall objective of this PATH project is to increase resilience to climate change by protecting livelihoods, by reducing vulnerability of ecosystems across the islands with regard to landscape management, and as well as strengthen the resilience of communities against climate change. Now, because Jamaica is an island and we're surrounded by water, and a large percentage of our population are along the coastlines or among the watershed areas, that makes this project that much more important. Specifically to the White River being a community-based organization and us being on the ground every day, we see a number of environmental issues that need our attention as a community-based organization, but also the attention of the higher heads, NEPA, RADA, government, the policies, and so on, to make sure that, when the time comes, that our communities are preserved and protected and not at high risk. So congratulations to everyone on the committee for initiating this project and, seeing it to fruition. Some of the things that we see along the White River watershed area, coastal development, which can contribute to nutrient pollution in the water. We've also seen over the years a number of tourist attractions, businesses right along the river's edge, and we know the sort of impact that that can have on the watershed. And therefore, this project will give us, White River, as a community-based organization, a lot of pertinent and applicable information that we can use to help our community members really, be prepared for what may come as a result of climate change. So very, very important. One of the areas where we as a community-based organization tend to fall short, which also happens to be one of the most important areas, is financial resources. So what we try to do is educate our community members about best practices, and so on. But we are very happy and excited that this project is happening because it allows for some more financial resources and, you know, greater things on a more national level to be done, and really puts the emphasis on community members and climate change resilience and so on. And with that being said, you know, congratulations to everyone again. It's really an honor to be here. We're excited to see this project continue to move forward, and we hope that what starts from today going onward and everything that we do from here on out will really help us to achieve a more natural and healthy environment towards our Vision 2030. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ryan. Thank you. We appreciate your endorsement as a direct beneficiary of the project. The insight and the practical perspectives of our civil society organizations, our community-based organizations, are really so important to ensure that the project is being effective in its implementation. And Ms. McKenzie spoke to data, the importance of data, and the information to be derived from the project, and how useful this will be for the work of the organizations such as the White River Fish Sanctuary. So thanks again, Ms. McKenzie. Ladies and gentlemen, mention was made in my opening remarks of the invaluable collaboration which we have enjoyed with our key stakeholders. A critical stakeholder is the National Environment and Planning Agency, NEPA, which has technical responsibility for, among other areas, the rapid ecological assessment and sustainable coastal management activities under the project. We're happy this morning to welcome Mr. Ainsworth Carroll, who will give remarks on behalf of NEPA. Mr. Carroll is a director of the Planning, Projects, Monitoring, Evaluation, and Research Division within NEPA. He's trained in finance and management and has a wealth of experience in the public and private sector, and which he brings to this project. So thank you so much for being here, Mr. Carroll, and I invite you to the mic. Please welcome, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You are also very kind. Senator, the Honorable Matthew Samuda, Minister of Economic Growth and Job Creation, Ms. Myriam Ferran, and delegation. She, of course, is the Deputy Director General, Directorate General for the International Partnership European Commission. Mr. Courtney Cole, Chief Technical Director, Special Projects, Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries. Ms. Ryan McKenzie, Sanctuary Manager, White River Marine Association and Fish Sanctuary. Our partners on this project, the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation, but of course, major work from RADA and from the Public Gardens Division of the Ministry of Fisheries, Agriculture and Fisheries. My apologies, Mr. Cole. Thank you for coming. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. And of course, our partners at PIOJ. Thank you for giving us this opportunity to address at the official launch of the Jamaican Path from Hills to Ocean project. The initiative gives the National Environment and Planning Agency an opportunity to implement activities to support ongoing programs within our agency. As we take action to strengthen environmental management in the country, the project's overall objective of increasing resilience to climate change and reducing poverty through the implementation of an integrated and sustainable landscape management methodology in 3 watershed management units: Wagwater in St. Mary, Rio Nuevo in St. Mary as well, and the Rio Bueno White River Watershed Management Unit in St. Anne and Trelawney. This project will assist to identify and prioritize actions in environmentally sensitive areas, and when executed, will influence legislative and policy decisions and lead to long-term economic benefits for communities. Managing environmental issues is integral to the national development objectives. As a premier environmental regulator, we recognize the importance and value of the country's natural resources. This recognition places a burden on us to ensure that these resources are managed and used in a sustainable way to support the livelihood of local communities. The national benefits are enormous and compelling. We must therefore continuously assess and monitor the environment and protect the country's assets. Initiatives earmarked under this project will certainly enhance this goal and objective of both the Planning Institute of Jamaica, the National Environment and Planning Agency, and of course our partners, other partners. When we protect and restore our watersheds, it provides opportunities to leverage the inherent ecosystem services they provide to support economic growth, while simultaneously contributing to building the overall resilience of Jamaica in the face of long-term effects of climate change. The Natural Resources Conservation Authority, the NRCA, has the mandate and responsibility for watershed management in the country. This mandate and responsibility are stipulated under the NRCA Act and the Watersheds Protection Act. The NEPA is the premier environmental agency charged with the responsibility of developing programs, plans, and projects to intervene and bolster effective management of watershed management units. Jamaica boasts 26 WMUs. The WMUs are classified into 4 broad groups, as outlined by management priorities, inclusive of physical condition and management needs. Currently, 4 of the watershed management units are ranked as severely degraded. The other 2 units targeted under this project are the Rio Mino and Wagwater River management units. Naturally, this project intervention will enhance previous interventions undertaken in the Yalas and Hope River watershed management areas projects, where we trained over 400 farmers and rehabilitated over 500 hectares of degraded lands. There are several activities and interventions that lead to the degradation of farm and watershed management unit lands. Illegal land clearing, settlement expansion, and associated improper waste disposal, poor farming practices, and forest fires are the major contributors to the degradation of our watersheds. These threats underscore the need to solidify and improve on the existing working partnerships and agreements among key agencies of government, including the local municipal corporations, RADA, the Social Development Commission, the Forestry Department, and importantly, local community organizations, based organizations. Climate change has presented significant challenges, and given our relatively small size, we are particularly vulnerable. The project as structured attempts to respond to some of these challenges. The rapid ecological assessment of the 3 targeted WMUs will provide empirical data based on projected climate scenarios to inform targeted adaptive strategies and interventions. Additionally, existing programmatic approaches with regard to surveillance, monitoring, and enforcement of the WMUs will be bolstered to reduce identified threats over the short, medium, and long term. The agency continues to work closely with the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation in the finalization of the watershed policy for Jamaica this year. This policy defines an integrated water resources management approach, and critical also in this policy is a framework which will continue to build out the interventions necessary for watershed areas management model, WAM, and the full development of the payment for ecosystem services mechanism. In this regard, we would like to thank the Planning Institute of Jamaica for leading the efforts for the project from negotiation at concept stage to the current coordination of its implementation. Additionally, our thanks to the agency's other government partners, the Forestry Department, the Public Gardens of the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries, and the Rural Agricultural Development Authority. And of course, very special thanks to the European Union funded Global Climate Change Alliance Plus, GCCA, for again providing the financial support to another bilateral project of this nature and importance. The National Environment and Planning Agency is indeed proud of its involvement in this project and remains committed in its contributions through our efforts and actions towards building of resilience in our beloved Jamaica. I thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Carroll, for your remarks. Thanks for reiterating the importance of the project and the ongoing pledging, the ongoing support of NEPA. We sought to ensure that the project was well aligned with NEPA's strategic priorities. And so NEPA was instrumental from the design of the project, or in the design of the project. And while NEPA has specific responsibilities under the project, the agency continues to provide broader technical guidance, and we're quite grateful for your inputs. Another key government stakeholder, ladies and gentlemen, is the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries, which through the Rural Agricultural Development Authority, RADA, and the Public Gardens Division is the technical lead on activities related to integrated and sustainable landscape management, as well as the restoration of the Casseton Botanical Gardens. The ministry is represented this morning by Mr. Courtney Cole, Chief Technical Director for Special Projects. Mr. Cole has a very strong background in agronomics, agribusiness, and management. He brings many years of experience to his task as Chief Technical Director in the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries. He is responsible for ensuring that the ministry's strategic projects are delivered and that the work of the Technical Directorate within his remit is well delivered. I now invite Mr. Cole to give remarks. Please welcome Mr. Cole.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Ms. Barbara Scott, whose substantive role is Deputy DG at the Planning Institute of Jamaica. I'd like to recognize Senator, the Honorable Matthew Samuda, Minister without portfolio in the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation. Her Excellency is Myriam Van Steen is represented by oh yes. Thank you very much. Mr. Peter Knight is represented by Ainsworth, Carroll. Thank you very much. I won't get into the calling of your title. That's a it's a very long title there, but I must come and see you because there's something in there that I want to talk with you about. Ms. Claire Bernard, Deputy Director General, PIOJ, and Mr. Sheldon Grant, Hills to Ocean Technical Director, and the staff of the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries, specifically RADA, Public Gardens, and others that are here this morning. Especially invited guests, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, one and all, good morning. I am very pleased to be here this morning representing our Permanent Secretary, Mr. Derman Spence, who would have wanted to be here this morning, but is unavoidably absent due to other commitments. But the agriculture and fisheries sector is particularly vulnerable to the increases in the intensity and frequency of extreme weather events, such as droughts and hurricanes, escalating rainfall variability, intensity of rainfall. So variability, in one sense, the seasons that we're used to, we're not seeing them anymore. Rain is coming at any time it chooses, and not coming at the time that we usually plan for. Higher surface temperatures and rising sea levels combined with fragile ecosystems. In fact, Jamaica is particularly susceptible to watershed degradation, as approximately 80% of the land surface is in hilly or mountainous areas, and more than 50% having slopes greater than 20%, or 20 degrees, sorry. Of note, small farming occupies the uplands and hilly terrains of central parishes, and impacts of disasters and climate change threaten agriculture and livelihoods in these areas. This has resulted in the agricultural sector experiencing periods of extensive drought, followed by extensive and intensive flooding, resulting, I believe, between 2014 to 2017 in about $2 billion of losses from the budget, money that could have gone into other endeavors that the government is undertaking. By the end of this century, I understand, projections show a considerable dry trend for the majority of the Caribbean basin. Jamaica is not spared, and the estimates are as high as 30% for reduction in rainfall. Wow, those numbers are daunting. Additionally, it is predicted that there will be shortages in available water resources, and increases in evapotranspiration already present a direct challenge to the water resources that we have access to. And the Water Resources Authority, in fact, predicted that demand for agricultural water, use of water in the agricultural sector, will increase by 18%. This at a time when there is expected to be reduction in availability or available water resources. All these impacts, ladies and gentlemen, will contribute to soil degradation and loss of fertility, an increase. Well, we are seeing an increase in the sargasso weed. On the terrestrial side, we're having serious impacts. On the marine side, we're having very serious impacts also. We wonder what will happen with the fisheries sector, the livelihoods of families in the fisheries sector with the predicted sea level rises and those kind of things. A whole lot of things to consider. We're happy for this project, so it's very timely. If unchecked, and this checking has to come about by change in our own actions, we can see deleterious effects on not just the agricultural sector, but of course across the broad scope of the different streams of activities in the country. The reality, ladies and gentlemen, is that these climate-driven impacts on the agricultural sector are likely to worsen. Wow. Don't even like to say that. But we have to build resilience. And it is within this context that the ministry has been putting in place several programs to lessen its impact on all areas of life and sectors in the economy. And I say all areas of life and sectors in the economy, not just the agricultural sector, because whatever we do impact and affects other sectors. We have been therefore incorporating climate change adaptation strategies and methods in every aspect of our agricultural planning and production systems and activities. And some of these initiatives include expansion of areas with access to irrigation. Currently, we are putting in an additional 1,500 hectares, and we're seeking projects to do more. Implementing of drought-resistant measures such as construction and rehabilitation of water catchment areas, the building of microdams and those kind of interventions, increased use of renewable energy sources, such as solar power. I mean, the NIC has been increasingly implementing solar projects to start up its pumps, to move water to farm gate. Focus on mariculture and polyculture in the fisheries industry. As our marine environment is impacted, we have to see how we diversify, because the demand for protein is continuing to rise. So when we are seeing negative impacts in the marine sector, we have to see how we diversify in the terrestrial sectors. Increased investment in alternate technology, such as greenhouse technology, and renewed focus on greening the country. The public gardens have a big responsibility there. And of course, we have to build capacity among the users of our non-renewable resources, or farmers, all the stakeholders across the spectrum. The ministry is therefore very pleased to be partnering with the PIOJ and the National Environment Planning Agency, along with other community organs or groups, in this project, a Jamaican Path from Hills to Ocean project that is aimed at increasing Jamaica's resilience to climate change and reducing poverty by protecting livelihoods. To achieve same, this Jamaican Path must lead to a reduction in the vulnerability of Jamaica's ecosystems by incorporating the principles of integrated landscape management and strengthening the resilience of communities within the targeted watersheds against adverse effects of climate change. We hope that there will be movement of the information from these areas also, that others across the country can benefit. We consider this project to be a very timely one, which aligns with Jamaica's Vision 2030 goal of achieving sustainable management and use of environmental and natural resources, as well as hazard risk reduction and adaptation to climate change. The ministry, in collaboration with the Rural Development Authority, is committed to working towards the implementation of the goals under this project, to include the development of sustainable landscape management programs and an integrated restorative coastal management program that will address the severe coastal erosion and the marine pollution currently being experienced. In closing, ladies and gentlemen, I wish to express our appreciation to the European Union for this grant, funding of 4.9 million euros towards the project, and we look forward to its successful implementation and outcomes. Thank you very much.
Thanks for your remarks, Mr. Cole, and your stated commitment to continued partnership on the project. We really have enjoyed the support of the Ministry of Agriculture, rather the public gardens from the initial stages of design of the project, and your support continues to be critical to the successful implementation of the project. So thanks again for your comments and your remarks. Ladies and gentlemen, the Hills to Ocean project is just one of a number of diverse projects and initiatives being supported by grant funding from the European Union. The EU epitomizes development partnership. And I repeat, the EU epitomizes development partnership. They played a vital technical advisory and, of course, administrative role in the conceptualization of the Hills to Ocean project. They have collaborated closely with the government through the project's development stages and approval, and the EU remains partners, important partners in its implementation. I mentioned in my opening remarks that the project launch coincides with the visit of a delegation from the European Commission in Brussels. We are indeed pleased to welcome the team, which is led by Mrs. Myriam Ferran, Deputy Director General in the Directorate General for International Partnerships. Mrs. Ferran joined the European Commission in 2001 after having worked in the French government for almost a decade. She is, since November 2021, Deputy Director General of the International Partnerships Directorate General in the EC, coordinating all the geographical services of this service. Since 2001, Ms. Ferran has worked for the European Commission in various capacities in the Directorate General for Enlargement, DG for Transport and Energy, DG for Neighborhood and Enlargement Negotiations, as well as in the Cabinet of the European Enlargement Commissioner. She was head of unit managing EU relationships with Iceland, Serbia, and Turkey, and was appointed director in charge of strategy and Turkey in 2017. Prior to joining the Commission, she held various administrative positions in the French Ministry of Budget and Agriculture and was deputy head of cabinet of the French Minister of Environment. We are so pleased to have with us Ms. Ferran. Ms. Ferran, I'm inviting you to the mic. Please.
Good morning. Senator the Honorable Matthew Samuda, Minister without portfolio in the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation, Mrs. Barbara Scott, Deputy Director General, Planning Institute of Jamaica, Mrs. Mackenzie, Sanctuary Manager, Mr. Ainsworth Carroll, National Environment and Planning Agency, Mr. Courtney Cole, Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries, my dear colleagues from the European Union and representatives from the Member States, other representatives from ministry, departments, and agencies from the Government of Jamaica, dear press and media representatives, ladies and gentlemen, I can only start by echoing the pleasure for me to be here with you today in Kingston, and I'm very happy that this visit coincides with this very important launch of a substantial project. I would like first to start congratulating the Government of Jamaica for all the efforts deployed in the fight against climate change. And if there is one sentence that all my interlocutors during my mission those days will hear me say, is praising the like-mindedness between the Government of Jamaica and the European Union. And I can say that if there is one first and foremost issue where we do coincide in our joint interest and like-mindedness, it's the fight against climate change. As many of prior speakers have said, we are all vulnerable to the impact of climate change. Jamaica is particularly vulnerable given its geographical situation, but so are we in the European Union. And I have to say that I'm here today at a time that I don't think I would have ever expected, a time where a heat wave is reaching and striking Europe, and where the temperature in Brussels as we speak is higher as in Kingston. I think this has never been seen. And this is really just to illustrate that wherever we find ourselves in the planet, we are equally vulnerable. So this fight is a common fight, and it's the #1 priority of what we call our geopolitical commission led by President von der Leyen. We set up a new policy in the European Union which we call the Green Deal, and of course this policy is aimed at applying all around the world. So what we do in the Department for International Partnership is helping our partners all around the globe fight the impact of climate change. And I'm very happy to be with you today just to launch what is a wonderful illustration on how we can cooperate to have a better impact on the phenomenon that is surrounding us. If we look at the future, it's of course not a one-shot. And the European Union has the firm intention to continue standing by the Government of Jamaica in the fight against climate change. We want to do this in application of our own strategy. You may have heard of the Global Gateway strategy that the European Commission just adopted. This is a strategy that frames the way we want to cooperate with our partner internationally to lead to sustainable connectivity and sustainable activities. And not surprisingly, fight against climate change ranks among the first priority that we will continue pursuing for the future. And I'm very happy to tell you that we also aim at trying to increase the impact of our cooperation by working not only via the European institution that I'm representing today, but together with our colleagues from the member states. And I'm happy to see the representative from France and Germany with us today. We just want to work as the European Union as the whole and stand by our partners. That said, and if I come back to this project, we are extremely grateful for the excellent cooperation we have had with all the agencies involved. And I think this is a great work that is being achieved by, of course, the coordinator of the project, the Planning Institute of Jamaica, but thanks to the contribution of all the agencies and departments that are involved in the implementation of this project, be they the Rural Agricultural Development Authority and the Public Garden Division under the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries, as much as the National Environment and Planning Agency from the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation. This project, as I mentioned, is worth 750 million Jamaican dollars, nearly 5 million euros, and it's one piece of the overall contribution that the European Union aims at providing to the Government of Jamaica to fight climate change and protection of and protect the environment. This is complementary to another very big operation, a budget support program that is worth 16.5 million euros, and that is particularly dedicated to protection of forest. And I'm very happy to see that through this project, a lot has already been achieved, and we are nearly reaching the last phase, but very important progress have been made, and I can quote just to open more widely what we are supporting. We have also supported the inventory of existing mangrove forest and worked with the government to help delimitate protected areas. And as you know, this is fundamental for the region you're living in. We are also continuing this effort at regional level, as the challenges you are facing are as shared by many of your Caribbean colleagues. So we have a regional Caribbean program which is called Euroclima, and it's an extension of a very successful program that was already implemented in Latin America. Another element I want to make publicity to, because I think that is sometimes not sufficiently known, is that the European Union is supporting a Copernicus Center in Panama, which is putting for free at the disposal of all authorities, scientific institutions, or interested stakeholders a lot of data and images that are particularly relevant for those who work on risk prevention and disaster management. So these are kind of a presentation of a wide range of activities we are implementing, but of course, today I really want to thank all the partners for this project and congratulate you on the success reached so far, and we are extremely hopeful to see concrete results as soon as possible, thanks to all your work together. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Ferran, for your remarks, reminding us, that's okay, reminding us of the priority that's been placed by the EU on climate change, and also reminding us of the various windows for funding which are being made available to countries like Jamaica. We regard EU assistance as invaluable, and we appreciate the cordial but productive working relationship that we enjoy with the local EU delegation. My colleague Anna Sato is here, and really just wanted to use this opportunity to thank you for the collaboration and the partnership. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now be provided with more details on this project which we are launching, and that will be via a video presentation. So please direct your attention to the monitors and to the screen. I think over here.
Spectacular views of the Blue Mountains, the cradle for the Watershed River watershed, one of Jamaica's 26 watersheds, and the source of 40% of the water for the Kingston metropolitan area. Fresh water rolls from these hills to the valley, supplying one of Jamaica's longest rivers, the White River, flowing for 27 kilometers past bamboo groves and lush vegetation, crossing the boundary lines of the northeastern parishes of St. Anne and St. Mary, to empty into the Ocho Rios Fish Sanctuary and into the Caribbean Sea. A Jamaican Path from hills to ocean. This is a story of a remarkable project to increase Jamaica's resilience to climate change by sustaining our watersheds, our coastlines, our land and marine resources, while empowering more Jamaicans with the required knowledge and awareness to secure their livelihoods in these spaces. The Hills to Ocean project is funded by the European Union Global Climate Change Alliance Plus in partnership with the Government of Jamaica to the tune of €6 million over 5 years. The project will implement integrated and sustainable landscape and coastal management interventions to tackle the thorny challenges of declining ecosystems, biodiversity loss, land degradation, and the vagaries of climate change affecting vulnerable communities in Jamaica.
The project intends to stop erosion in selected watersheds to reduce degradation of important terrestrial habitats, sedimentation of the marine space, loss of soil productivity, and pollution of the rivers and streams for improper waste management. The restorative activities are therefore designed towards building climate resilience and transforming managing capabilities within affected ecosystems and communities.
In the lower reaches of the watershed, The flow of the Wagwater River has slowed to a trickle in parts of the picturesque Castleton Botanical Gardens. For Oswald Eyre, a longtime resident of the Wagwater Valley and president of a local NGO working with 17 communities, the Hills to Ocean project is a welcomed addition to the ongoing efforts to restore the watershed.
These are two big resources, Castleton Gardens and the Wagwater and its tributaries. In the early days, the Wagwater was most important for fishing, for recreation, for training everybody on the banks of the Wagwater, some 17 to 18,000 persons. By age 10 or so, they will be able to swim. There was a section of the river that we call Deep Hole, very deep, and it retained water. And when rainfall is low, those deep holes will gradually feed the stream with water. And by the time they are exhausted, rain would come again and refill them. All that is gone today.
The Hills to Ocean project will directly benefit Castleton Gardens and many other communities and residents who make their livelihood from key economic sectors like agriculture and tourism. There are 3 targeted watershed management units under the project: the Wagwater WMU, including Castleton Gardens, the Rio Nuevo WMU in St. Mary, and the Rio Bueno White River WMU in St. Anne and Trelawney. The project will also focus on wetland ecosystems at Winsmorass on the coast of Falmouth, Trelawney, and farther inland at the Mason River Protected Area at the border of St. Anne and Clarendon, a Ramsar site known for its rich biodiversity. The Hills to Ocean project will also assess the health and distribution of seagrass beds in the Ocho-Rios Marine Park Protected Area and at the Helsha Bay and Half Moon Bay Portland Bight Protected Area in St. Catherine and Clarendon. From hills to ocean, the downstream effect of pollution and indiscriminate dumping of solid waste in the White River pose real threats and challenges for Ocho-Rios, once a sleepy fishing village, now a bustling town with vibrant tourism and other commercial interests, and the community of fishermen who were there from the beginning. Belinda Collier-Morrow, a diver and chair of the White River Marine Association, which has partnered with the fishermen in the area to run the Ocho-Rios Fish Sanctuary, remembers a time when the coral reefs were healthy and the fish were in abundance.
This project will definitely help us because we're totally aligned with what this project is doing. When people clear the lands, that's also coming into the river and smothering and getting out to sea, smothering the corals. And you see the river turns brown. You can see it goes for miles out to sea when we've had a big rain. So, this project will work to address things like that. Better farming practices that will affect the river, that will in turn affect what we're doing out there.
I think the Hills to Ocean is a great platform for us to really get information about how serious this is, because we, as the White River Fish Sanctuary, as a local community-based group, we can only do so much.
Working in the sanctuary, it's an eye-opening, for it teaches us to care, the bad habits and, the do and the don'ts,
If people have an understanding of what their actions do and why it matters, I think that is what is going to make a difference.
The Planning Institute of Jamaica is the executing agency of this high-level Hills to Ocean project. A core project management unit collaborates and coordinates daily with technical experts from the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries, Rural Agricultural Development Authority, RADA, and the Public Gardens Division, and from NEPA, the National Environment and Planning Agency.
The implementation of this project is a direct investment in data collection and research and will strengthen the technical capacity of the National Environment and Planning Agency, ultimately bolstering its monitoring and early warning capabilities. Together, let us join hands and hearts to manage and protect Jamaica's land, wood, air, and water.
Given the new national campaign by the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries to grow smart and eat smart, we look forward to the new possibilities presented under this project to teach new techniques, build resilience, and strengthen our island nation. Rather aims through the promotion of integrated and sustainable land management practices, as well as direct transfer of knowledge to achieve these goals.
The Hills to Ocean project was developed through partnership and collaboration. The direct project beneficiaries are members of the communities in the 3 named WMUs, but the entire Jamaican population will benefit from its outcomes. The PIOJ looks forward to continued collaboration with residents, the European Union, and state partners in making this project a success.
We value and appreciate the cooperation with Jamaica regarding this project, as it will allow us to further progress on the joint fight on climate change. Jamaica has proven to be a pioneer in the region regarding the subject, and we are very happy to see that actions are taking place every day to improve the life of Jamaicans, as well as of all those sharing this planet, since climate change doesn't stop at national borders.
Ladies and gentlemen, you'll agree that the visual representation presents such a compelling case for the project. Thanks for your attention. My colleague Claire Bernard, who is Deputy Director General for Sustainable Development in the Planning Institute, was given the task of introducing our keynote speaker, but unfortunately she's not well and she can't be with us this morning. Claire, by the way, is the technical lead on the project in the Planning Institute. So I have the honor of introducing the keynote speaker, and our keynote speaker for this morning's launch is Senator the Honorable Matthew Samuda, who since January 2022 is serving as Minister without portfolio in the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation, with responsibility for water, environment, climate change, and the blue and green economy. Minister Samuda has worn several hats and has always had a deep respect and regard for the environment. His passion for the preservation of our environment and for building resilience to climate change is widely recognized. He is a staunch defender of environmental issues. He brings to his portfolio strong commitment, enthusiasm, and advocacy. Those of us who are Jamaicans in the room remember his relentless charge, or leading the charge on the ban of the single-use plastic and styrofoam in 2019, I think it was. Minister Samuda has a demanding schedule, and so we really are honored to have him with us this morning. It is my pleasure to welcome Senator the Honorable Matthew Samuda to address us.
Madam Master of Ceremonies, thank you for your kind words, but I would say that it is me who is honored to join you all this morning. So, protocol has been established, but I think it's important to make a few introductory mentions. The friends we have in the room from the EU, your friendship to us in Jamaica is something we deeply appreciate. The consistent partnership, I can tell you in my own experience in government, has been very helpful. In my previous assignment in the Ministry of National Security, I would have worked with your teams on the Citizen Security Plan. And having come over to, let's call it the issues of sustainability since January, it's been particularly useful to see that commitment in other areas as well. I think all in the room would agree that these issues of security and sustainability are at the core of Jamaica's future prospects. So we thank you. I go further as a member of the former, well, certainly an alumni of the EU VP program. It is indeed good to see you this morning. Members of the Jamaican government, certainly a team from PIOJ, NEPA, the Ministry of Agriculture and Fisheries. I see members from the Met Service, definitely members also from the Ministry of Economic Growth and Job Creation. It is indeed my pleasure to join you. But I also see some notable environmental warriors in the audience, and it is indeed good to see them. For me, the introduction may as well be the Cabinet's resident tree hugger. Now, doesn't mean I always get my way, but certainly my view is put forward quite loudly when the opportunity presents itself. Now, I note Dr. Henry's absence, which puts me under particular pressure, because those who have ever heard Dr. Henry speak at a function will tell you that he always starts with a joke. So you've not had the benefit this morning of Dr. Henry's usual humor. So perhaps I can take a stab at it and you can tell him whether I do badly or well. When I overheard one of my cashiers tell a customer, "We haven't had it for a long while, I doubt we'll be getting it soon," I quickly assured the customer that we would have it whenever she wanted it by next week. After she left, I read the cashier the riot act. "Never tell a customer that we're out of anything. Tell them we'll have it by next week," I instructed her. Now, what did she want? Rain. But further, a climate scientist and a climate change denier once walked into a bar. The denier says, "Bartender, show me your strongest whiskey. This one here, it's 95% alcohol." The denier slams down the fist and leaves the bar in a hurry. The scientist says, "You know that's the problem with these guys. You show them the proof and they still don't bite." Ladies and gentlemen, I hope I did well, but you can tell Dr. Henry that I tried in his absence. The Prime Minister said at the UNGA in 2017, and again in his budget presentation this year, that sustainable economic growth cannot come on the back of environmental degradation. In fact, inclusive prosperity cannot be steeped in pollution. And I think that's a good place for us to start this discussion at this extremely important launch this morning. Jamaica, like all countries, are facing the triple planetary crisis. The issue of climate change causing global warming. I spoke to my brother in London this morning. It was frightening to hear the temperatures there. The issue of biodiversity loss, and the issue of pollution. Globally, we've zoned in this year on the issue of plastic pollution, but the issue of pollution is not limited just to that. This project, from a Jamaican path from hills to oceans, in many ways seeks to address Jamaica's vulnerability in all three areas. The issue of climate change is particularly worrying, and it should be to all Jamaicans. In fact, 70% of us live within 5 kilometers of the sea, and with rising sea levels, that creates the risk to our survival. Now, governments, when we're on the political stumps, when we're trying to become government, we always basically say we don't just want to survive, we want to thrive. But with the risks that we face, we cannot ignore the steps that we must take to survive. And that is an important understanding that I think many of us need to continue to impart to those who don't necessarily see things the same way. This project is critical. It'll touch approximately 46% of your population in some way, shape, or form. Its impact will be felt by those who don't even know that it exists. And that is a particularly important statement, because Kingston and St. Andrew is your most populous region, And in May of 2022, we had 11% of our 30-year average of rainfall. Not 11% below our 30-year average of rainfall. We had 11% of our 30-year average of rainfall. Now, that doesn't mean that you didn't have more erratic rainfall in March and April, but I'm saying that to drive it home that we are in the throes of climate change. It is not future-proofing. It is about survival today. It is about creating the base of our economic prosperity today. Because the climate has changed and the weather patterns have already changed. And my colleague from the Met Service will tell you just how erratic some of the patterns are looking. Every time I get an email from them, I gulp. When I was in security, I used to get a crime report every morning at 5:45. And you take a deep breath before you opened the email. Now, here I am, taking a deep breath at 5 a.m., a little earlier than the report I used to get when I look at the rain report, because I'm not seeing the projection of rainfall, certainly in the southeast of the island. And that itself should tell you why this project and projects like this is so important. It is precisely because of that I thank the EU for their commitment of 16.5 million euros earlier in the year that goes to the Consol Fund, specifically to help with environmental matters related to forestry. And it is precisely why I thank you for the contribution to this project. The fact is, the word ambition is thrown around. It's, let's upscale ambition, let's get greater commitments. And that's important. But we're not, as a global community, honoring our commitments. So new commitments without honoring the past ones is not going to halt what's taking place. It's not going to turn the corner. And it's going to put small island developing states like Jamaica at particular risk. Now, that risk can be defined in looking at any of the SDGs. You can go through Vision 2030. All targets are at risk if we don't halt the effects of climate change, if we don't build in the resilience. And resilience then becomes the next buzzword. But I think importantly to note is Jamaica didn't create the climate crisis. Now, we're good at creating some of our own crises, and I think everybody in the audience will agree. We've done our fair share of creating crises, but we didn't create that one. That, however, does not absolve us of our moral imperative to ensure that we hit our environmental targets that match our articulated ambition. Because I want to be able to go to meetings and shout at other people too. But we have to hit our targets to give ourselves the moral authority to do so. To quote a friend of mine, it's action that going to do that, right? And that's just a reality. And we have a long way to go. It's certainly my hope that Jamaica will be able to establish itself as a center of excellence for environmental management, climate change mitigation, and climate change adaptation. That means we have a lot of action to take. Now, establishing ourselves as a center of excellence, and whatever imagery that brings to your mind, will require a lot of work. But it's not just important because we want to stand up on the international stage and say, we did that, we did that, we did that. It's terribly important because we have to lift our people out of poverty. And if we don't become a center of excellence in environmental management and in the issues related to climate change, we will not lift our people out of poverty. We will be in the perpetual cycle of recovering from disasters. And yes, team at PIOJ and the Ministry of Finance are readying the financial sector. They're creating the fiscal space to allow for the financial response to these disasters. But there's so much more we have to do. That's simply not enough. I'm happy that Jamaica is putting its money where its mouth is, certainly within our budgetary space, and we're committing some funds to this. But we have to do a lot more. We have to hit every single target associated with this project. We have to spend the time to work with our stakeholders, ladies and gentlemen, who will help us to implement. So NGOs, environmentalists, community leaders, we have to work with everyone. If something is due on Wednesday, we need to be trying to finish it on Monday. We are in a race against time. Now, we have the tools within our toolbox to get a lot more done. When we get a lot more done, I have no issue going to go knock at the new EU office gate and say, I need more help. But we need to get a lot more done faster. The issue that we see in our near coastal environment should be visible to all of us. I'd hope you all have the chance to visit closer to the coastline as often as you can. But the degradation from our own action is visible. I would have grown up going to Helsha. Helsha is an area that I know intimately. I used to play music on the beach. Strange as that may sound to some of you, I had a sound system at one point. I used to play on a Sunday evening at Helsha, on the beach. Where I used to stand is now underwater. Now, that's 15 years ago. That's not my mother telling me some long story or me remembering a story my grandmother used to tell. I have pictures from my BlackBerry on that beach playing music. If I was to stand in the exact position that I used to play, I would be underwater. Now, I've never been accused of being tall, but 5 feet of increased water should tell you we have an issue. Now, the climate has changed. There is some sea level rise, but we also destroyed Helsha collectively. And many of us didn't stand in the way of it. So it's destroyed. Now, the environment and ecosystems are an amazing thing to watch. They recover when we get out of their way. Right? Now, sometimes you can help it along, but generally the environment is resilient and it recovers when we stop being bad neighbors, when we stop being the toxic ones in the relationship. So there's a lot of work we have to do. And we say, well, you know, it's just what happened at the coast. No, there's so much more that happened upstream that led to the issues you see in Helsha, that leading to the issues you're seeing in Ocho Rios, that leads to the issues you're seeing right across our coastline. And we have to accept that, and I think it's particularly important. And I'm very heartened to hear the presentation specifically from the Ministry of Agriculture, because the need to bring modernity into our agricultural and fisheries practices is so critical to us achieving what we're trying to achieve from hills to oceans. What we do on land affects what happens in the ocean. What we do in the ocean affects what will happen on land. The two are completely linked. In trying to one-up my good friend, Dr. Henry, I picked up a book from Enric Sala this morning, because any of you who know him, he is I think his official title is Explorer in Residence for National Geographic. He's in charge of the Pristine Seas program. And he has a very quirky sense of humor when he tells environmental things. So in looking for jokes, I was looking through one of his books to find one that I'd read a while back. And I said, you know, it could be useful also from my layman's understanding, because I have great environmental intent, but I certainly don't have the knowledge as my friend there, Rooster. So, you know, I don't have that knowledge, right? But I certainly have the intent and willingness to support the initiatives of the professionals that will help us to get where we want to get. And I looked at what I would call a layman's definition of ecosystems, and I'll share it with you. In his book, The Nature of Nature, he describes it as ecosystems have had billions of years to experiment and through trial and error self-organize into the most efficient machines in the universe. They are always changing, and until recently, always fluctuated within reasonable bounds, following predictable pathways. We cannot really recreate much of what ecosystems do for us, yet dead ecosystems have allowed humans to feel like masters, but also to be destroyers too. Now, I found that particularly profound, because this environmental discussion we're having this morning is as much an economic one. Protection does not lead to economic loss in the medium and long term. And I think if anything is going to be taken away from this, certainly from my presentation, I would ask us to look a little bit beyond our proverbial nose in making discussions in making the decisions re-protection. I'm a politician and I make no secret about that. I'm not ashamed of it. I think political service is as important as anything in the fight to preserve democracy. But myself and others will have to be bold if we're to hit some of the targets we've set for ourselves. And invariably, they're informed by the policy team in the room. So Jamaica is a member of what's called the High Ambition Coalition, 30 by 30 by 30, which means we have committed to protecting 30% of our terrestrial land and 30% of our EEZ by 2030. Sounds good. Sounds good. We've just completed, I think, about 25% with the recent declaration of 78,000 hectares of the cockpit country, something I'm particularly proud of. The truth is we dawdled for 40 years and didn't protect any of it. So really and truly, that's a major step in the right direction. In our marine environment, though, we have much less to be proud of. We've only protected about 13%. And, level of protection could be debated. So we have a lot of work to do in this regard. Now, this will take all of you lending your voices to this cause. I will do so politically, but we will ask you all to do so from the technical perspective. Because it has to be understood that protecting the right areas within your marine environment can create an economic benefit that is 10 times, from some of the studies I've read, 10 times the value of your current fish yield. By protecting the right spaces, we can sustainably harvest 10 times the value of our current fish yield. Now, the process in how you do that won't be painless, because any dislocation to some of the most vulnerable in society causes particular difficulties. And this is the area that once we've gotten our technical work correct and we've scoped the projects, this is the next area that I know I certainly intend to reach out to the EU for assistance. Because yes, the globe made some strides with the WTO discussions recently with fish subsidies and IUU fishing. But the subsidies and the thinking has to be, how are you going to subsidize those to not fish in areas that they shouldn't fish, to not use practices that they currently use for their survival? And in developing countries, that's how we have to consider it. How are you going to create the social safety net that allows us from the environmental perspective to work with fisheries in a way that doesn't displace their critical stakeholders? Because we don't want environmental decisions to create short-term poverty. We want it to create short-term, medium, and long-term prosperity. Now, this project, the project brief is in front of you all. I won't go into the specifics. But a project that touches these watersheds is directly tied to our future prosperity. And in that vein, I thank all of the agencies that have worked tirelessly to bring us to this point. I will give whatever support you need from my office to ensure none of your targets are in question. And certainly, especially as you dive to go and assess the seagrass, if anyone is going out and would suffer my presence, I would be happy to join you. I thank you all.
Thank you so much, Minister Samuda. We thank you for continuing to advocate for the preservation of our environment in Cabinet. Thank you also for your vision of Jamaica becoming a center of excellence for climate change mitigation and adaptation in the region, and importantly, reminding us of the link between environmental management and poverty reduction. Very important. Of course, also, you mentioned the urgency with which we should be seeking to implement this project, because we are in a race against time. So thank you so much again, and we appreciate the time that you have made to be with us this morning. We know that we can count on you for continued support, Minister, especially if there are any policy recommendations emerging from the rapid ecological assessment. So you'll be hearing from us. Excellent. So, ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the end of the launch of the Hills to Ocean project and this segment of today's proceedings. I wish to acknowledge again with gratitude the presence of Minister Samuda, Ms. Ferran, all our EU and EC colleagues, CTD Cole, our colleagues from the Ministry of Agriculture, Mr. Carroll, and colleagues from NEPA, as well as our civil society and academia representatives, all invited guests. Thank you so much for participating in this morning's event. Your collaboration and cooperation are indeed appreciated. I also want to recognize my own staff in the Planning Institute, Dan Davis and Camille Wildman, and the PEU staff who worked so hard in putting the launch together. I really appreciate it. And colleagues from Sustainable Development Division, Claire Bernard, SHOP, as well as the Corporate Governance and Management team. Thank you all who you've contributed to the planning and execution of the event. We really appreciate your efforts. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now going to take a short break for refreshments, after which we'll proceed to the second segment of today's proceedings, which is the validation workshop, where the results of the rapid ecological assessment will be presented. Thank you so much again.
Good morning again, everyone. We're about to start the second segment of our program this morning. So we're asking those at the back to move towards the front, please. Thank you. Yes, please. Give me. I'll take the one from up there. Yes, people have been sitting here. Ashley. Okay, so just tell them that. I can distribute. Yeah, we're going to distribute.
So, will you be emceeing the
We're about to begin. Okay, now that we have been sufficiently refreshed, we're now ready for the second segment of our proceedings this morning. Hello. Good morning again, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the second segment of our proceedings this morning, the validation workshop for the rapid ecological assessment. Firstly, let me apologize for the absence of Ms. Claire Bernard. You'd have heard Ms. Scott speak about it earlier. She was responsible for chairing this session this morning, but she's a bit under the weather, and so I have been tasked with doing this role. Let me hasten to say that we are heartened by the presence of your partners and key stakeholders, and we do appreciate that you have taken the time to sit with us today. Your inputs and feedback will prove invaluable to the delivery of outputs of this project, which seeks to increase resilience to climate change and reduce poverty by protecting livelihoods. In order to adequately understand the environmental issues impacting these watersheds and the lives and livelihoods of the residents within them, we have contracted an esteemed and highly experienced team of scientists who have prepared this rapid ecological assessment and supporting reports. The findings of these assessments will be shared with you over the course of today. As our most valued partners and stakeholders, your task today, therefore, is to listen keenly to these presentations and provide us with comprehensive insights, feedback, and opinions. We are depending on your expertise and extensive first-hand knowledge of the area to ensure that all issues and concerns are well ventilated towards the overall aim of ensuring that our project resources are effectively matched to the needs identified. Your input will also serve to inform the implementation of the remaining activities under this project. The format of the workshop, which you will see on your agenda, is to have the presentations of the findings of the assessments, and that will be followed by small group discussions, after which our consultants will give their response to your feedback. Further instructions will be provided later. To start off this morning, we have Dr. Dwight Robinson, head of the Department of Life Sciences at the University of the West Indies, Mona, and team leader for this consultancy. He will give us an overview of the rapid ecological assessment, and he will be followed by two members of his team, Dr. Danica Luke and Dr. Eric Garraway, team leaders for the floral and faunal assessments respectively. They will present the findings of the physical and biological assessment report. But first, Dr. Robinson. Let's make him welcome.
Thank you very much. Yes, I have everything plugged in. They just need to switch to it. Thank you. All right. Good afternoon. I almost said good morning because I was hoping I would be taking the podium in the morning. Good afternoon. Good to see you here. And thank you, Madam Chair, for the introduction. I was told I have 10 minutes. But what I'm going to do is that I'm going to try to go quickly so I can yield some of my time to my team because they have absolutely good information that they want to share. So I will just go through my bits here very quickly. So as you can see, it was on the 3rd of November 2021 that we signed an agreement in order to do this rapid ecological assessment. And of course, our job is to do the rapid ecological assessment of the 3 watersheds that have been mentioned. Now, the watersheds have already been named, and so you have heard them several times this morning, so I won't bother to do them. And some of what we are supposed to do in terms of characterize, delineate, map the major terrestrial and aquatic habitats that exist in these 3 watersheds. And our team will present some of the preliminary findings. You could not get the findings here. As rapid as we tried to go, you find that you really could not cover everything. That's the objective that we have. We hope, to define the priority areas for integrated and sustainable landscape management. And of course, we want to recommend possible interventions when we see exactly or we learn what the actual state is. Now, the outputs. Big output is supposed to be the Rapid Ecological Assessment Report, but it has different groups. So we're going to have the physical and biological assessment, we have the socioeconomic assessment, and of course, we have the climate change assessment that we're going to do. The project site, as you heard already, pretty large area. It's approximately 17% of the Jamaican land mass. So you can understand how challenging it is to cover such a large area in this short time. And so we had to use methodologies that would allow us to do it rapidly. I mean, one of the things I saw coming out of this is that we probably don't need a rapid ecological assessment, but we need a true ecological assessment of this area. And I hope we'll see some of that, hear some of those recommendations coming out. And we can then talk to the minister that when he goes back to the EU, he will ask for funds for that possibility. Now, as we did, and as we looked at the things, there are a couple of things we saw. Before we went in any at all, just what existed, that it's a high priority area for conservation due to the fact that it has high species diversity. Right? So that was one thing we were looking at. But we noted that already before we went into assess, they were saying it was heavily fragmented, right? And there are various habitat types. And the one that bothered us is that it said extensive anthropogenic disturbance exists in these watersheds. Now, we will hear from the team to see whether or not that has changed, and if it changed, is it going better or is it getting worse? The team, just want to introduce the team to you as they come up. Multidisciplinary, and it's the Faculty of Science and Technology. Truly going across. It's not, I heard it said life sciences. It just so happens that my colleagues were nice enough to allow me to lead the team. But my role, really, nothing much to talk about, you know. My job is to just talk to Miss Wildman over there. So the female team leader, bear in mind, it's over 100, approximately 100 people that have been involved in this at different levels, whether it's field guide, whether it's the person who drives us into the field, whether it's those persons who carry the bags, whether people do things, a whole lot of people, the people doing the surveys, but our team leaders for the climate assessment, Professor Tanisha Stevens from the Department of Physics, or from the Climate Studies Group, Mona is well known. She's the one who led that aspect of it. In terms of the socioeconomic assessment, Dr. Donovan Campbell from the Department of Geography and Geology. He is the one who led that aspect of it. And in terms of the physical and biological assessment, we have Dr. Garway and Dr. Luke. Dr. Luke is responsible for the floral assessment. Dr. Garway is responsible for the faunal assessment of this. And we have gone through the activities, a whole lot of activities. As you can see, we can tick them off. We have done most of them. The ones that you see there that says continuing, where you have lab work, data analysis, and post-survey, it's not that we haven't done them, but we got so much information that even when this project is done, I know my colleagues, they're going to be combing through it. And what we have done is that we have indicated to the PIOJ that anything interesting that comes up, even though the project done, and you're not giving us any more money, we will share that information with you, right? So, but it's going to be ongoing because there's so much information that came out. And of course, we are now working on the final report, and that is the information that will be shared with you. And when you get your feedback, etc., all of that will be incorporated to that final REA report that will go out, that we hope will be of value and will help in the whole conservation of the ecosystem in that area. Thank you very much.
Okay, so now we will have the presentation from Dr. Denika Luke, team leader for the floral assessment. Dr. Luke?
Good morning, everyone. Just waiting on the presentation to come up. Here we go. Right. As was mentioned, I am Dr. Luke. I'll be looking at the floral aspect of the physical and biological assessment, and Dr. Guy will look at the fauna. Right. So just to orient yourself as to where exactly the 3 water management units are, the largest one is the Rio Bueno, that's in purple. The yellow is Rio Nuevo, and the red is the Wagwater. So the approach we took was to look at the different land cover types that exist, right? And we used the 2013 Forestry Department's land cover map as a guide, right? And we started by looking at the land cover which we thought would have the least amount of anthropogenic influence, right? It so happens that within the Wagwater WMU, there is a small patch of disturbed closed broadleaf. However, we weren't able to access that. So instead, we started by looking at the secondary forest areas. One of those areas so happens to fall in a management area. It's close to the headwaters of the Wagwater River, right? And in that particular area, what we found was that there was 90% native species, right? And that included some of our endemic palms, the macafat, and one of the royal palms. In other secondary forest areas that were not in management areas, you see a decline in the percentage of native species, and that is a general trend across all 3 watersheds. As the anthropogenic influences increase, you start to see a decline in native species and increase in the number of exotics, right? When you get into the areas dominated by people, you start seeing more fruit trees and the spatodia, right? That's everywhere. That's characteristic of areas that have suffered some form of disturbance. And in Wagwater, everywhere you look, bamboo. Bamboo and guinea grass is covering the watershed. We did look at the herbaceous flora, and we found that 53% of that flora was native, and sadly, there were no endemics. Rio Nuevo, the land cover type that had the least amount of anthropogenic influence, was actually disturbed closed broadleaf. Again, the trend is a decline in the number of native species as human influences increase. As you can see there, 80% natives in the disturbed closed broadleaf. Secondary forest, it falls to 58%, right? And again, spatodia everywhere, right? Herbaceous flora, 41% native, 4% of those being endemic. Rio Bueno, this is an interesting one because it was the only WMU that actually had closed broadleaf forest. And all the species that we definitively identified were actually native species, right? Similarly, it was the only one that had open dry forest, right? And again, all of those that we found were native species. That included 35% endemics for the closed broadleaf land cover type and 10% endemics for the tall open dry. And again, we start to see a decline in the number of native species as anthropogenic influences increase. Herbaceous flora in this watershed, 80% native, 4% endemic. We did come across some species that were listed on the IUCN Red List. Here they are, listed according to the different WMUs and the land cover type in which they were found. Reoccurring theme, right, reason for concern is a reduction in the habitat, right? And this has consequences for the remaining population, whether it be that it's limiting their ability to reproduce or affecting the microclimate in which they exist, or that's putting pressure on the present population. Now, we also created land cover maps, right? And we used 2020, 2021 Sentinel images, and we classified it using an object-oriented image analysis. We found 15 classes across all 3 watersheds. It doesn't mean that all 15 classes were found in every watershed, right? So let's look at the first one, Rio Bueno. And what we can see is that it's fairly well forested. Let me check that. It has a fair amount of forest, right? Predominantly secondary forest. there is some closed broadleaf, as we said earlier, and if you notice, you can see here, it's heavily fragmented. These olive green blocks, those are the closed broadleaf fragments. And what we found was that a lot of the endemics were found in those fragments, and they were limited to only one fragment, right? So that fragmentation has consequences for those individual populations, right? So that's something that we need to look at, right? We tried to map areas of change. So we looked at the Forestry Department's 2013 land cover map and one that we just created. It's not a direct comparison because there's differences in the images that were used, differences in the methodology of the classification. But what we looked at were the core areas of these blocks and try and see what changes occurred. Now, it probably isn't that clear on these images, but there are slight color changes in each, which show you conversion, which is listed here. And it's better viewed in this table, right? You start seeing that in this class, open dry forest, right, in 2013, of what was there in 2013, only 20.3% remains. Most of that conversion was for fields and buildings and infrastructure, right? Open dry forest, you start to see, right? In this case, 85.4% remain the same. One of the major drivers that change was to buildings and other infrastructure. Disturbed broadleaf forest, 84.3% remain the same. A lot of it converted to fields. Closed broadleaf, fairly decent, 96.6%. Conversion to fields, one of the main factors. Right, renewable. Again, secondary forest, that's the major land cover type. Right, looking on the conversion, we start to see predominantly the conversion was taking place in the disturbed broadleaf areas, right? And most of it was to fields and some of it to buildings. Water. As we said earlier, most of it is bamboo. Right? See that large block of gray? Right? Secondary forest, only 13%. Disturbed broadleaf, 2%. And secondary forest pine plantations, 2%. So Wagwater is only has 17% forest cover. Right? Serious issues. Right? Most of the land cover change that took place was in that disturbed broadleaf forest. Not much, but what was converted was to fields. All right? This table is just listing the 15 land cover classes and the area that each occupied within each water management unit. That's it. Thank you. Dr. G, over to you.
Question for Ms. Levin?
After.
Can you get them afterwards? Thank you. You can just make a note of it and you take them afterwards. You take them afterwards.
Okay, good afternoon. The animals are defined in an area to a great extent dependent on the plants. So basically what I'm going to be presenting, so I got to stand, right. I like to walk up and down, unfortunately. A lot of what I'll be presenting to some extent is based on what you just saw, in that the animals depend to a great extent on the vegetation type. I'm going to talk a bit about the aquatic systems. So when we start there, we spend some time looking at the major river systems, just to see what they look like. After all, we're looking at watersheds, right?
So we need to know what's happening in the river systems. And we looked at several things, very basic things, humidity, temperature, pH, dissolved oxygen, things like that. These are standard of things you measure when you do freshwater analysis. Most of the water systems that we looked at, because we looked at the really big ones, Water River, the White River, the Rio River, things like that, and a couple of the smaller ones. Most of the systems we looked at were fairly healthy, right? They were fairly healthy. So that looks good until we started looking at some details and find that there are some areas of that have some problems. And I just want to highlight some of these. Not surprisingly, the first one that jumped out at us was the Water River. As you start up top in the mountains and follow the river down to the sea, there are some rather drastic changes in some places. One of the things we looked at is what we call conductivity. And this tells us how much solutes, how much things have been dissolved in that water. So if you got nice, pure water, you probably have conductivity between 50 and 100 or something like that. And if you follow me here, in the upper regions of the river, Mount Erie, you go up above Hermitage Dam, our conductivity came out in the region of 100. That's actually quite good. Close drinking water. But we go downstream a bit, and we come to a place called Castleton. And it jumps to 500. It's shot up to 500. That tells us right away something is happening between the upper regions and Castleton. We didn't have enough time to work out what it is and where it's actually happening, but clearly it's an alarm bell for us to go back and have a closer look. And as Dr. Robinson says, the REA rings the bells so we can send the minister to get some more money so we can go back and do some detailed work. As you go down towards the Broad Gate and lower down, the conductivity gets a bit lower, mainly because there are other river systems coming in and probably diluting the water. But there's clearly something there for us to look at. We looked at the amount of oxygen, the dissolved oxygen, which is of course important for the animals that live in the water systems. And the one that really stood out is in the lower regions, very low oxygen. This would clearly affect what animals you find there. To some extent, the lower regions of the water is subject to things like a lot of sand mining, which creates large areas that looks more like pools or ponds rather than a river system. And that has changed lots of the available oxygen available in the systems. So that's something which would have affected what animals we found in that system. When we look at the aquatic fauna, we found that the lower sections of the water, the fauna we found there were more like what you find in a lake or in a pond. It did not look like what we expect in a river system. In fact, the diversity here was much higher than we expected it, but mainly because a lot of these animals don't really belong in a river system. They shouldn't be there in the first place. But they're there. Another system triggered off some alarm bells. Went to Lagans, and we found relatively low number of species. And this is what we call this, Simpson's diversity index. Just give you a measure of the relative diversity in different systems. And the red points to what we found at the Lagans, way, way down the bottom, much lower than everyone else. But there's something else happening there. We don't quite understand it yet. The presence of what we call the black sand right now is probably some sand, was quite a bit of it on the sides of on the banks and the flow of the river. And this seemed to affect the diversity of the organisms in a big way. This work is still continuing. We have sent samples to ISENS. We haven't got back the information yet. But this thing is coming in, and we don't know exactly where it comes from, because this is rapid. So we didn't have enough time to go searching upriver to see exactly what it is. And hopefully in the big report, we will be able to tell you exactly what this thing is, and then we can take steps to manage it. But this depressed the diversity in a big way. So I want to leave the physical factors for the time being and talk a bit about some of the animals we found in the freshwater systems. And bear in mind, we're just giving you just a couple of snaps, little bits and pieces, because we only have a few minutes, okay? We ran into the eels, and this is an endangered species, right? It's an endangered species, and we found it only in two of our river systems, the Rio Nuevo and the Rio Bueno. We found it in these systems where the water was relatively good. We didn't find it in all the other systems. I'm not saying it's not there, because we are only there for a short time, and systems do change. There's a fair amount of fisheries going on in some of these river systems, and various human activities which could be impacting on this endangered species. Among the fishes which we found was an invasive species. All right, this is an invasive species. People call it tiki-tiki. It's a nice old tiki-tiki. Some people call it mosquito fish. But basically, it's a species that's known to impact members of the goby family. And it's, from all our readings, seems to be well established in many of the Jamaican river systems right across the entire island, which makes it a bit more difficult to control. We had a quick look at some of the species that go back and forth up the river, lay eggs, spawn, eggs go down to, move back and forth. And one of the things which we picked up, that these fishes, or we call them needle fishes, we only found them in the lower regions of the wog water. That is, they didn't seem to be able to get up to the upper regions where the water is much nicer, where they will normally spawn. So it seems that there's a barrier somewhere there preventing this from happening. This is just a snapshot, so we can't answer all these questions, right? We are simply creating the questions which we will hopefully answer later on. A bit about the terrestrial fauna. I'm going to go through this rather quickly. We looked at the diversity of all the different things, the mammals, the birds, the amphibians, the insects. The wog water was really where the problem was. That was the most heavily degraded. And this is a quick comparison. The wog water had much fewer species, and bear in mind here, a lot of it is bamboo with very little diversity, and fields which often have a large number of exotic species. So this here is, in itself is worrying, because most of it is in the fields, and most of that's going to be exotic species, which we probably really don't want. The Rio Bueno and the Rio Nuevo systems, the White River systems, these are much better. They had a much wider variety of land use types, not so much bamboo, and they were much better. We wanted to find some indicator species if possible. And I'll tell you what happened here. When we started looking at the animals, it was like looking into a black hole, because there's very little information before. In the case of the plants, we had maps and things like that. For the animals, we had very little. So we're hoping to find some indicator species which we can use in the future. And we found a couple of caddisflies and a couple of damselflies, and these were the ones which would tell us when things are good. And we found them relatively highly distributed in many systems. We also found this snail. This one wasn't very good news. This snail is able to tolerate lots of stress. And when you get some sort of disturbance, the native species get knocked out because of the stress. Normally they'll come back, but not this time, because that snail takes up the space. And basically, almost every time we found large numbers of this snail, there was very few of the native species. So that can be used as an indicator that the system has gone through or is going through serious stresses. We pulled out a few of the things which are on the IUCN listing as species that are under, which need special conservation attention. The giant, sorry, did I say giant? Oh, the blue swallowtail butterfly is one which we found. They found it in the open dry forest in the region around Rio Bueno. That's a species that's listed as vulnerable by the IUCN and has very limited distribution, therefore should be paid attention. The endangered black-billed parrot, we only found it in one area, in Union Hill and Ulster Spring region, sorry, two areas, Union Hill and Ulster Spring regions, where we had a relatively good forest. It's endangered, needs special attention, and the critically endangered, again, flower bat. It's only known from two places. We found it in Green Grotto, and it's known from one other region in the entire island. And the last thing I want to mention is that we were able to collect a vast amount of what we call baseline data. You'll see this in the final report. And I remember I said when we started with the animals, we were looking into a black hole because there's nothing there for us to start with. So we have hopefully created here, out of this work, a vast amount of baseline data from which we can go forwards. I think that's about all the time I have today. Okay?
We take note of the promise to share with us any important findings from the team from further research, but we also take note of the areas for further investigation, the conductivity issues at Castleton and the lower regions of the Wogwater River, and the deposit of black sand within the water and on the banks of the Laughlands Great River. From the floral and faunal assessment, we noticed that the Wogwater WMU really has some serious issues. We saw the impact of anthropogenic influences on native species and on our forests, and the direct correlation between the preservation of our good forests, the closed broadleaf forests, and the existence of our endemic species. We also saw the reduction in the habitat of the species on the IUCN list found in the watersheds and other issues internal to the watersheds. So at this moment, we're going to move into our group discussion session, but I just want to, I wanted to ask your permission to have questions answered at this point in time. Could you go ahead, sir? Please introduce yourself when you ask your question.
My name is Lambert Forrest, and I am
Wait a second, please, for a microphone. Yes. Wait for a microphone, please.
Thank you. My name is Lambert Forrest, the only lamb in the forest. And I'm a part of the Mount Salus Farmers Group, currently serving as their president, retired principal, but one who has a deep interest in agriculture. And currently I do a little. I started just to supplement my kitchen, but sometimes I have enough to supply others. Interesting for me is that what has been presented, especially by Dr. Luke, in a very informal way, has been my interest over the years, especially as it relates to the Wogwater area. As a little boy, I used to go to the Wogwater to there was a particular hole there that I used to swim in. I remember getting a good flogging from my mom for spending the greater portion of a morning at the river when she sent me out to shop. And I would have watched the deterioration of that river to the point where that hole was no longer available for us as little boys to swim in. Now, as I look at the scientific research aspect of that area, I can recall, I am just giving this, but I have the question here.
Go ahead, please.
But I'm just giving you a little background,
That's
as
fine.
to my observation in from a layman's
That's
perspective.
quite okay.
How I see the transformation of that area. And I can remember in the 60s, 70s, I'm not so old neither am I so young. I am only 68 years old. But I can remember seeing the big fields of yellow yam and the broadleaf, as you mentioned, and then slowly the yam fields disappear and were taken over by bamboo, because the bamboo they used to stick the yam.
Yes.
So when the farmers stopped cultivating, the bamboo grew.
kept growing.
Also, if you can recall, there was a rapid promotion of the cultivation of coffee. And then after a while, when the price of coffee, people tend to abandon the area, abandon that crop production. But during the time of the coffee, the pesticides that they use and the fertilizer, it caused some of the same fauna in the river to change, to die, because we used to go fishing. We used to catch the mullet, and as was mentioned, no eel. Yes, we used to catch eel in water, but there's none now. Now the question I want to ask, what are the impacts of bamboo vegetation as against broadleaf vegetation on the watershed area as it relates to Wagwater in particular, since I am somewhat familiar with that area? And how can it be corrected? And when I ask how can it be corrected, going back to what I know it was, when that river used to be a river. It's basically a spring now. And if you permit me, I knew of a gentleman by the name of Mr. James, who in the early 60s related a story to us as little boys. He used to do farming on the other side. If you are familiar with Templar era, yes, he used to do farming. And he reported that one day it rained heavily, and he waited for a while for the water to draw, as you would say. And about 11 o'clock in the night, he decided to go home. And when he got by the river, he was very good at crossing that river. And when he got to the river, he took off his clothes, put it on top of his head, and started going. There's a particular way to cross the river, he said. You don't take up the foot after the sand. You pull the foot, each foot. And he said when he thought more or less that he had passed the middle, where the current is, it was a peony wally he saw, which when it gave its light, he realized that he had not reached to the middle as yet, and the water was at his neck. He had to turn back and spend the night in his hut until the following day. So, yes, as I listen to the reports, you're on target from my layman's perspective of what it used to be as against what it is now. Now, I know it would be a daunting task to remove those bamboos and to replace them with broadleaf forest, but it is not impossible. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your question. I'm going to ask Dr. Robinson and his team if you could just come to the head table to respond to the questions for the purpose of the for the purpose of the cameras. Thank you. You can use this microphone.
Again, thanks, Mr. Forrest, for the question about the forest. So, you asked about bamboo. What I do know is that bamboo suppresses the growth of, or the establishment of the native species. And if you give plants enough time, they can recover. So like, in the presentation, I showed you a section of secondary forest that was under active management, right? That was close to the headwaters. I think it's on NWC land in Mount Airy. The percentage of native species in that area was 80%. And in other studies from the Blue Mountains, if you compare the structure, the density of trees, the basal area, it's similar to secondary forest that is recovering, that is found in the Blue Mountain area. But if you look at other secondary forests in areas that aren't being managed, right, where people go in and them cut Spanish elm and them cut sweetwood and all other things, you saw that that area only had 58% native species. So if there was a way, right, to protect as much of the little that is still in water, right, then given time, it could recover. Bamboo, on the other hand, is a totally different beast that I'm not quite sure. Based on discussions with other people, what you said about farmers back in the day planting all those hills using bamboo as sticks, yeah, that's what they said. And funny enough, when I was out in St. Anne, I came across a farmer in his farm, and he was using bamboo. And I asked him the same question. And what he did was turn around and say, yeah, man, see one spot right there, so a couple years ago, I used bamboo and I leave it, and it start growing. Every time I come back, I have to come and chop it out. But this guy is close to 80. Him soon stop farm. When he stops going there, what's going to happen? Yeah. Hopefully that answers your question.
But there's something else I was looking for in the response, because I imagine that broadleaf forestation would enhance more moisture.
Yeah.
As against bamboo.
So I can't give all the answers because I don't know. But when it comes on to, generally speaking, reforestation, it is not as simple as people believe. It requires a lot of study to determine what species to plant where. And the sad part of it, I'm going to say it, is that funding agencies in Jamaica like to say, that's academic research. The fact is, today's academic research is tomorrow's practical work. You need to find out what grows where and how to grow it. There are other countries that have spent time, 20 years, to develop their systems so that they can reforest an area in 5 years. We've been to some of those countries. We've spoken to those guys, and the man said to you, yo, if we have the information that you have, we could have cut it by 10 years. But when we come to people with the funds in Jamaica, no, we're not doing that. We want to plant some apple tree and some orange tree and take pictures and look good. Right? So if you want to restore the watershed with broadleaf, native species, you have to figure out how to grow them. And that takes time and money. Not 2 years, not 3 years. It takes time.
Thank you very much. We have a question at the back.
Yes, good morning, good afternoon. I hear, sorry, one of the speakers made mention of black sand being dumped in the water. I just want some clarity on it. Is it that because of the mining, or is it something that is taking place presently? Could you expound on that for me, please?
Could you just introduce yourself as well, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. My name is Jacqueline Ogilvy, the facility manager at Castleton Gardens.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, first the correction. The black sand was in the Laughlands River, not in the water. That's one. Second thing, we don't know the origins of it yet. We don't even know exactly what it is yet. We have sent it off to iSense. We haven't got back the response yet to know what's the origins, and that's something which should take much more time than we had to go trekking up the river to track it down and see what it is. No. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Luke and Dr. Garway, for your responses. Any other questions? No? Okay. Okay, so we will move into our group discussions now. I think we can form about 4 groups, Camille? 4 groups of about 6 persons each. Can we do that? We don't have to, we'll be discussing the same topic, so it doesn't matter if, but we'll try to have not to have 2 persons from the same organization at any table. So we're going to just ask you to form yourselves in about 4 groups of 6 or so to move into our group discussions. You will have a facilitator at each group. No?